Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to the public meeting this afternoon. I'd like to recognize first our elected officials who have joined us here tonight. Thank you for coming out. My name is Lucas Atwell, and I am the Outreach Manager for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers here in New England. I'll be your moderator and your facilitator tonight. At this time, I want to introduce you to the people at our front table. We have first here in order Stephen Rochette. He's our Technical Support Branch Advisor. We have Tammy Turley. She's the Chief of our Regulatory Division. We have Frank Del Giudice. He's the Chief of our New Hampshire section. And we have Lindsay Lefebvre, the Project Manager evaluating this project. We will begin the presentation with a brief from the Corps' Regulatory Project Manager to provide an overview of the Corps' regulatory evaluation process and a summary of the impacts associated with this proposal. This will be followed by a brief presentation by the applicant. We will then open the floor for questions before concluding this meeting promptly at 7 p.m. We are holding a second meeting after this at 7:30, so we're going to ask that everyone is respectful of the time allotted. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you of the importance of completing the registration cards that you saw at the front of the room. They're at the table close to the door. These cards serve two purposes for this meeting. First, they let us know that you're interested in the project evaluation so we can keep you informed. Second, they provide a list of those who wish to speak tonight. If you did not complete a card but wish to speak or receive future information regarding this permit evaluation, one will be provided at the registration desk. As there are many who wish to comment, you'll be provided 2 minutes to speak when the time comes. Your statements, along with all written statements submitted, will receive equal consideration, and we'll take comment cards until July 3rd. One additional note, we are here to receive your comments, not to enter into discussion on those comments or to reach any conclusions. Any questions you have should be directed for the record and not to the individuals on the panel. However, the Corps will answer questions related to the permit evaluation process tonight. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our Chief of our Regulatory Division, Tammy Turley.
Thank you, TJ. Good evening. Again, my name is Tammy Turley. I serve as the Regulatory Division Chief for the New England Corps of Engineers. Our headquarters is located in Concord, Massachusetts, and our area of responsibility includes all 6 of our New England states. I would like to also welcome you to our meeting tonight and highlight the reasons we're here. First, we want to ensure that we're clear regarding our public evaluation process and the process that we will go through to evaluate the proposal. And most importantly, we want to hear from you tonight regarding any comments you have regarding the proposal by the Granite State Landfill's proposal to work in waters of the U.S. To date, the Corps of Engineers has not made any decisions regarding this proposal. It's our responsibility to fully consider environmental and socioeconomic impacts before we make a decision. In order to accomplish this, we need your input. So again, thank you for participating in our public interest review. This is your opportunity to present your views either verbally or in writing this evening or until July 3rd, as TJ mentioned. The Corps of Engineers is neither an opponent of nor an advocate for the project. We're here as an impartial party accepting comments from the public. Our intent is to gather information to help us consider in our evaluation. At this time, Lindsay Lefebvre, the project manager, will provide an overview of our evaluation process. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Lindsay Lefebvre, and I'm the project manager that will be evaluating the Granite State Landfill for the New England District, Army Corps of Engineers. The mission of the Corps Regulatory Program is to protect the nation's aquatic resources while allowing economic development through fair and balanced decisions. Today, we will provide an overview of the regulatory program authorities, the proposed impacts associated with the Granite State Landfill within our authority, and our evaluation process. Next slide. When making a permit decision, the Corps must ensure compliance with other federal laws, including the laws and regulations listed above. Only the ones that are highlighted in bold are applicable for this project. We are currently in the NEPA evaluation process. The second one we have to comply with is Review under the Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which includes consultation with the New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources, as well as the appropriate tribal consultations with the Wampanoag and Aquinnah tribes, which both have been notified of this project, and that will meet our tribal trust responsibilities. Lastly, we have to comply with the Endangered Species Act, and the 2 species we have out on this site include the northern long-eared bat and the Canadian lynx. And we will consult with Fish and Wildlife Service with any impacts or effects to these species. Next slide. The Corps of Engineers regulatory program is primarily administered under 2 authorities, Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act and Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. Under Section 10, the Corps regulates work in, over, or under navigable waters of the U.S., and under Section 404, we regulate the discharge of dredge or fill material in waters of the U.S. For this project, only Section 404 is applicable. We do not have any Section 10 waters on this site. The diagram below depicts the limits of our authority in freshwater river and wetland systems. Next slide. Under Section 404, fill material can be defined as replacing any portion of the waters of the U.S. with dry land or changing the bottom elevation of any portion of the waters of the U.S. Examples of fill material can be seen in the photos below. So what we have examples of are a coffer dam in a river or stream, bank stabilization, wetland crossing, stream enhancement. There are plenty of other examples, but these are just a few to give you a general idea. Next slide. It is important to note that the discharge of dredge or fill material does not include the following that are listed on this slide. Dredging or excavation in Section 404 waters, activities that involve only the cutting or removing of vegetation, pile driving, and then trash or garbage. Next slide. Okay, so this slide is just an overview of the project. The green area is where the proposed landfill is going to be sited. Proposed activities subject to Section 404 authority occur within the area that's shaded in green and are related to the landfill construction and associated infrastructure improvements, as well as improvements to existing roadways. Proposed activities not subject to our authority, Section 404, is disposal of solid waste into a landfill or discharges of leachate from the landfill are not within our jurisdiction to regulate and therefore are not a part of our permit review. You can also see what the proposed impacts to wetland and waters include, 11.04 acres of permanent impact to wetlands and 1,628 linear feet of stream impact. Next slide. We received a complete application from the applicant on March 7th, 2024, and then published a public notice on April 9th. This public notice was then extended until July 3rd, so we will be accepting comments up until July 3rd. The link on the bottom is a link to the public notice, plans, as well as the wetland application. And also here you will find an email address where you can submit any comments. And I'll have a slide on, my last slide is the QR code and that email address as well, but you'll see around the room that we do have the QR codes that'll direct you to that website, and you scroll down and click on the project link and you'll be able to find everything there. Next slide. The public notice serves us the initiation of the public interest review, which includes the evaluation of probable impacts, including cumulative impacts of proposed activity on the public interest. The decision will reflect national concern from both protection and utilization of important resources. The benefits that result from the proposal must be balanced against its foreseeable harms or damages. And all of the public interest factors listed here on this slide are ones that we take into consideration. So I'll just give you one moment to look at these factors.
Can you focus that any more clearly?
Okay, I'll read them out for you. Yes, that's probably hard to see. So Aesthetics, conservation, I'm having trouble seeing that. So much stuff over here. Economics, energy needs, fish and wildlife values, flood hazards, floodplain value, food protection, consideration of property ownership, general environmental concerns, historic properties, cultural value, needs and welfare of the people, shoreline erosion and accretion, water supply and conservation, land use, mineral needs, navigation, recreation, safety, water quality, and wetlands. For any given project, not all of these always apply, so some of these may not be applicable, but the majority of them are for this project. Next slide. The Corps also has to evaluate the discharges of dredge or fill material according to the 404B1 guidelines. These guidelines are regulations established by the EPA that constitute the environmental criteria used in evaluating activities regulated under Section 404. Under these guidelines, no discharge shall be permitted if there is a practicable alternative to the proposed discharge that would have less adverse effect on the aquatic ecosystem, so long as such alternatives does not have other significant adverse environmental consequences. A practical alternative is available and capable of being done when considering cost, technology, and logistics. Lastly, USACE must identify the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative, or what we refer to as LEDPA, and only permit that alternative. Next slide. When making a permit decision, the Corps must ensure compliance with other federal laws as well as state permits and certification, which include the following, and I'll read from the slides so everybody is aware. So 404 water quality certification, New Hampshire DES standard dredge and fill permit, New Hampshire DES alteration of terrain permit, which there's a typo that we missed, so say alteration. And then New Hampshire DES solid waste permit, as well as a 404 permit from EPA, but they coordinate with the state on that. And then next slide, this is my last slide. This is a QR code we have posted around the room where you can find more information about the project, the public notice, as well as that email address where you can send in comments. So that concludes our overview, and I will pass it off to Joe Gay to give a brief project description.
Could you leave that email up a little longer? Sorry.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Will these slides be posted?
I think we're going to have them available to everybody, yes.
Might take a minute, Joe. Okay, slides. Have to switch.
It'll just take one moment to get the slideshow switched over.
Thank you, TJ. Good evening, everybody. My name is Joe Gay. I'm an engineer with Casella Waste Systems, responsible for the permitting for the Granite State project. I also want to thank the town for hosting the event tonight, and also the EPA for having the event and allowing public participation. We think that's very important and crucial to the project. Next slide. So, Casella Waste Systems, North Country Environmental Services, and Casella Waste Management, as well as Granite State. We have a strong presence in the state of New Hampshire with our solid waste, recycling, and organics infrastructure. We are in over 200 communities across the state of New Hampshire and provide services on collection, transfer, and disposal, as well as a variety of organics management across the state of New Hampshire. We've been in the state a long time and look forward to continuing to serve our customers and our constituency in the state as time moves forward. Next slide. Just a little background of the project itself. Again, as the North Country Environmental Landfill in Bethlehem reaches its capacity, which we expect to be in 2020, the end of 2026, sometime in 2027, we want to transition from that facility to this facility, and obviously we've been working on some permits for a few years to make that transition smooth. The Bethlehem landfill is our only active operating landfill in New Hampshire, and so the plan is to make a smooth transition from that site to this site.
Sorry, we just lost the slides for you, Jim.
The project area is in an industrial area. We'll have a map that will show with more detail, but zone 116. I think a lot of people know where the chick sand and gravel site is. That's the site of the proposed project. The footprint of the landfill, which we also have a map that we'll be able to zoom in on.
I got it for you.
Okay. Actually, you can go back to the last slide. And one more. Okay. So the project considers a 70-acre footprint. So when we refer to footprint, we're talking about the lined area of the landfill where the waste would go. So that's what's proposed, is a 70-acre footprint at the Granite State site. It would provide capacity for 18 years of waste disposal at that location. Along the way, we will consider renewable energy projects as the development moves along. And we note that there's excellent road access, highway access to the facility. Route 3-116, it's one of the things that attracted us to this site was the travel lanes, very robust and favorable for the location. Next slide. I think we've seen this slide once already, and echoing what Lindsay described. There's several permits required to ever be able to develop this project. All of these permits are in process at some level. The New Hampshire Wetland Standard Dredge and Fill permit application is in process. The Army Corps, the permit that we're here to talk about tonight, is in process. The Waste Management Division, the Solid Waste Operating Permit, is also in process. The New Hampshire DES and combined U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 404 Water Quality Certification Permit process is in process. As is the air permit, the groundwater management release permit, the driveway permit, and the shoreline permit. All permits required to develop this site. I think an important thing to note, and I'm sure we'll get into it more as time moves on with the town, the property that's there has multiple parcels, and we are looking to acquire 2 of the parcels on the property, and everything we need for the landfill to develop is on those 2 parcels. Next slide. Wow, so this one's a little bit hard to see maybe. So this is 116 here. Littleton is off the page here. Whitefield off the page here. This is the chick sand and gravel access road into the project area. Doug Anderson's property is all of this red boundary here. Of course, it goes off the map. This is Mr. Crow's log yard, landing area here. The shooting range is down here. The rally school is off to the north here. At the end of the 3,000 or so foot driveway is the proposed project area. This is the 70 acres that I referred to earlier. It does have a white outline that depicts the 70 acres. This area here, and I understand it's probably a little difficult to see from back there, this area here along the access road is the area where we have our gas management and our wastewater management area. Scales, some of the things you need to operate a landfill are located in this area here. These areas that kind of show up on the plan are areas at the site that are existing gravel operations. And then Forest Lake is there to the east. Next slide. This figure depicts some of the improvements that we're going to be required to undertake at the entrance of the facility. So we've been working with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation on a driveway access permit for the project. This plan depicts a new access that would be perpendicular to 116, which is here. For safety, DOT will be requiring an acceleration lane and a de-acceleration lane as trucks enter and exit the project. So we wanted to just reflect this figure because it would be some activity you folks might see down on 116 closer to the highway. But again, this is the new alignment. This is the existing alignment. And this is 116 here. Okay, next slide. This figure's busy. The gray area that you're looking at is access road. The brown figures in this plan depict buildings or structures like the scales. So as trucks would come into the facility, they would come into this queuing lane here. There's 2 scales proposed for the project. Trucks would exit the scales and maneuver up the road, up to the site, which is just off the page up here, but still close to the landfill. Maintenance garage, landfill office, gas management area, wastewater management area, and then when we're closed and the gates are closed, there will still be access to the back of the property for Doug and his family to continue to operate their gravel operations there. Next slide. This is just a brief on the schedule. Mentioned earlier, we're right in the middle of our permitting, 2024. That'll all be permitting effort into 2025 as well. And then if all permits are issued sometime in 2025, we would start to develop the site, like the entrance, and do some of the work that we need for the infrastructure. And the first section of the landfill would start to get developed. And then in 2028, begin operations. I think one thing that's important that we just touch on tonight in relationship to really the theme for tonight's meeting is some of the benefits that the town of Dalton would receive in a host community agreement. It's common for landfills and for this company to arrange with host town agreements with the local municipality and work out some benefits that the town would realize to offset, any of the negative impacts that might come along with a solid waste facility. And it's a common method to work closely with the town and communicate with the town. So that's something that I know we want to get in front of the town. I know Rebecca will be working with the town select board to set up a meeting so we can get in and start talking about some of the details of what that host town agreement might look like. There are some things that we've already proposed with the community, such as free curbside collection. And for a lot of people, I think that has a lot of value, free curbside and recycling collection. That's one of the benefits that's been proposed. Next slide. We've mentioned a property protection plan. That's something that we could talk to the town about. $2 million per year in annual payments. Again, these are all something that can be negotiated with the town and the select board. Creation of a $50,000 fund replenished annually for improvements to enhance town's aesthetics. Or however the town may choose to spend that money. And we're also proposing a compost, leaf and yard waste area on site to manage the area's leaf and yard waste as well. Next slide. A couple other things that I think would be important ongoing with the community is we would like to come in and speak to the town quarterly, openly about the project, where we are with certain things, answer questions that the town may have an open dialogue with the community. That's something that we want to offer to the town if it so chooses. Mailers to the residents for those who may not be able to get out to a meeting. We can send you some information on what's going on, keep you updated that way. If that's preferred, we can do both. And then, as I just mentioned, we definitely want to get in and talk to the select board and start talking details about what a host community agreement might look like and what the town, might have interest in. Next slide. Yes, I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you having me tonight.
And just for the folks online, I know some of the slides, the Wi-Fi's been going in and out, so if you missed some of the Casella slides, we can try to make those available if you put your information in the chat, if you're interested in getting those after the fact. So apologize for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the questions and comments today will be conducted in a manner so that all who desire to express their views will be given an opportunity to do so. To preserve the right for all to express their views, I ask two things. One is that there be no interruptions, and two, that all speakers abide by the time restriction so that all who wish to speak will have an opportunity. We want to make sure as many people as possible get a chance to exercise their right to express their views, concerns about the project. Lastly, I'd like to re-emphasize that the Corps of Engineers has made no decision in regard to this permit application. It is our responsibility to fully evaluate the applicant's proposed activity and its impacts on the environmental resources. Again, we are here to clarify the Corps' evaluation process and receive your comments, not to enter into any discussions on those comments or to reach any conclusions. Any questions should be directed to the record and not to the individuals on the panel. However, of course, we can answer questions about our process. As you came in tonight, I know there's a few people who came in a little bit late, so bear with me. I'm going to talk about the cards again in 1 second. As you came in tonight, you were asked to fill out a registration card. This card is used to identify people who want to make comments or ask questions tonight. And also, it'll provide us with the information needed to notify you of further actions, including our final decision. If you have not completed a card and wish to do so, they are up front at the registration table by the door. Individuals speaking today will be called on to the microphone, and if you have mobility issues, please just raise your hand and I'll come to you. When you make a statement, please come forward, please state your name and the interests you represent, if there are any. If you speak as an individual, please say so. And as there are so many of us who are wishing to provide comments and questions tonight, we have 27 so far, I would ask that you take 2 minutes to make your comment or ask your question. And I had a big clock, but my clock went down, so I'll be using my cell phone. I promise I'm not texting anybody. I'll be using my cell phone to time you, and when you hit 2 minutes, I'm just going to raise my hand, and I'm going to do my best at that, okay? Thank you. Oral and written statements will receive equal consideration. Therefore, please summarize any written statements into a short length, and we'll take those up to July 3rd. Once again, please keep to the time restriction so as many people as possible can speak. And I'll begin by naming the first person, and then I'll name the two that are coming up next. That way those folks can be prepared. So first we'll have Representative Rebecca McWilliams, and the next folks after her will be Kelly Potenza, and bear with me on names, please. And Veronica Ann Morris.
Thank you very much, TJ. My name is Rebecca McWilliams. I'm a state representative. I represent the city of Concord, and I'm here to tell you that this issue, the expansion of a landfill, is a statewide problem. It's not just a Dalton problem. It's not just a COAS problem. It's a statewide problem. From the downstate perspective, if nothing goes wrong with the liner at this new facility, and if the people running this facility don't have the same record of spills they've had in Bethlehem and Coventry, then the billions of gallons of leachate will not go into Forest Lake or the surrounding wetlands, but this new billions of gallons will go into the Concord, Franklin, Allenstown, and then into the Merrimack River with the PFAS untreated. I'm here to speak on behalf of the children, the grandchildren, our school students, and the next generation of New Hampshire who will be impacted with the health effects of PFAS in our water and our leachate into the water. Our aquifers will be poisoned. This is forever chemicals we're talking about. Big picture, we're talking about fish population. You can't drink the water, you can't eat the fish out of the water. The Merrimack would be so polluted. So this is about the future, and this is to let you know that you can't put a dollar or a price tag or a donation to offset the future generations in New Hampshire. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Next we have Kelly Potenza.
Thank you very much. I'm Representative Kelly Potenza from Stratford District 19. I'm from Rochester. I'm on the Environment and Agriculture Committee. I've been dealing with this subject now for 2 years, and no one wants this landfill except for maybe 0.01% in the entire state that have heard about it. It's really sad that we're in this situation. I'm going to actually ask a question. I don't understand how the permit process goes through when just this week GSL now actually has to do a full a renewed wetlands application. So how are you guys have a permit, or you're looking at a permit? Are you guys going to answer?
That's a question for the doctors.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you got up.
Ma'am, can you repeat the question? We were trying to find some tape. I'm nervous someone is going to trip, so I apologize. I was trying to find some tape. Thank you.
Okay, so just this week, there is, it's on the DES website actually, they have a letter that's a request for more information in regards with the Wetland Bureau. So basically, GSL is going to have to redo a full field wetland delineation now. That would probably end some other serious lists as well, because their solid waste application is actually not complete. So they're going to probably have to have a 60-day deadline to get the new wetland delineation done, and then possibly have to ask for an extension. So how are you guys at this point looking at a permit when they don't even have their application piece for the wetlands isn't done?
Thank you. Appreciate that question. Our permit evaluation processes is going in parallel with the state. So they have separate requirements, and Lindsay mentioned several processes the state is going through and several different permits. So let's say, example, a new information is discovered in our process or the state's process. The applicant would then update all of the various permit applications that are currently pending. So I think you phrased, how are we considering a permit? We're evaluating our application just like the state is. So we're at the beginning of our public interest review, haven't made any decisions, and need to collect and evaluate a lot of information before we would make a decision. If anything comes out of the investigation you just mentioned, then our application would be updated as well. Okay.
I know I only have, I have no time, so I just wanted to say real quick that I'm from Rochester. We have the largest landfill, which is in Turnkey. We have plenty of capacity. There is not a landfill that is needed, especially not up here. And I do have to say that I would hope that you guys actually hold a formal public hearing, you know, when this process goes forward, and also write an environmental impact statement for the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we'll hear from Veronica Ann Morris, and then after that, Adam Finkel, and then after that, James Murr.
My name is Veronica Morris, and I'm a selectman with the Town of Bethlehem, and here on behalf and with the full authorization of the Board of Selectmen of Bethlehem. First, I'd like to thank the Army Corps of Engineers for coming today. We understand that the North Country is a little bit different, and we have a lot more trees. The proposed site of the Granite State Landfill is accessed from Route 116, which some of us call Whitefield Road still, in Bethlehem. All of the proposed changes to Douglas Drive and Whitefield Road to allow for the proposed truck traffic are in Bethlehem. The Ammonoosuc River joins up to parallel Whitefield Road and go right past the proposed site in Bethlehem. These roads have route numbers, and all the roads that Casella puts forth in their traffic management plans say things like US Route 3 and Route 302 and State Route 116, but I hope that you've now had the opportunity to see these roads. While they support some industrial uses, including a log processing plant and a gravel pit, they also hold our homes and our schools and our farms. Whitefield Road is already heavily traveled and frequently the scene of accidents, including fatalities. These fatalities in Bethlehem are responded to by Bethlehem's Police Department, Bethlehem's Fire Department, and Bethlehem's volunteer ambulance service. The dramatic increase of truck traffic carrying both solid waste and leachate would not only endanger our residents, but it would be a dramatic burden for our volunteer fire department and very small police department. Additionally, the proposed improvements required for GSL to utilize Whitefield Road and Douglas Drive in Bethlehem will make permanent impacts to the riparian buffer of the Ammonoosuc River. This river has a highly variable water flow. In high bank areas, such as at the Prospect Street Bridge, it rises to the bottom of the bridge in high water events that happen semi-annually. In low bank areas, such as in Littleton near the Shaw's grocery store, it floods into the parking lots and they make little store islands. Is that my time?
Yeah. Sir, can I yield my time to the lady? I'm interested in what she has to say. I have a 2-minute allotment. I'll yield to her.
Is the room in agreement?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 minutes.
Thank you. This riparian buffer is critical to supporting our wildlife, including moose, bear, lynx, and lesser-known species like pine martens. Bethlehem coasts Casella's current facility in northern New Hampshire, North Country Environmental Services. This landfill is sited directly upstream of the proposed Granite State Landfill. Now, the NCES landfill is in Grafton County, not Coos County, but it's worth noting that it's less than 5.5 miles away from one driveway to the next. The continued disruption of wetlands, the continued interruption of wildlife corridors impacts not only the site, but also for the ability for residents to continue to feed their families from the rivers and surrounding lands. We rely on hunting to fill our freezers every winter. We rely on fishing to keep our families fed. And this is also our water that we drink. It's directly that we drink it, and we drink it out of our aquifers through our wells. If you look at the map that Casella showed of their municipal customers in New Hampshire, they are overwhelmingly in the southern part of the state. It doesn't make sense to put a landfill up here. I can't imagine that they're gonna want to spend all that money on diesel fuel, let alone the fact that it is, frankly, probably kinda seems like on sand and uphill from the Ammonoosuc River. And if there is an unfortunate incident, I'd like to point out that water runs downhill. I respect that Mr. Casella started his business as a young man with a pickup truck and has grown into a $5.7 billion corporation. I truly do. But if you look straight across the North Country, from Plattsburgh to Coventry to Bethlehem, the North Country already supports this company. We host it, we live with it, and we're done. We're tired.
Thank you for your comments. Up next is Adam Finkel.
Thank you, Adam Finkel from Dalton, just representing myself. I've submitted written comments already. I definitely want to endorse what Rep. Potenza said. We certainly urge you to both have a formal public hearing on the record and to do a full EIS of this project. Frankly, I'm coming to you as a former senior appointee at EPA and OSHA, and you guys can do this because it's the right thing to do, or you can do it because you will be litigated and asked to do it. So I hope you will strongly consider those requests. So I started working on the boring field of cost-benefit analysis in 1981. And you guys are the only ones who preceded my generation. You've been doing this since 1936 with the Federal Navigation Act. And you are the giants on which we stand. So I have a question which I think probably can't be answered right in real time. But I'm puzzled by the statement that it's only the dredge and fill that is in your purview. Because obviously most of the projects you do, the dredging and the filling is the project. This is dredge and fill in order to have whatever the figure, 10 million tons of trash and the resulting leachate. So the question is, can you name, just in words, not in numbers, a single benefit of this dredge and fill portion of the project? I don't think there is one. The benefits, if there are, and I believe there are none, are from the landfill itself. So if you can't identify a benefit of the dredge and fill, your job is done. The permit is denied. If you define benefits of the project, by all means, but then you have to look at the costs of the project. And my comments and many others have delineated huge costs that dwarf any phantom benefits and huge costs that are not even mentioned in the application. There are huge sections of this application that are simply missing. So I urge you to do a cost-benefit analysis, do an EIS, run the numbers, and you'll see what we all see. Almost zero benefit, tremendous cost. No brainer. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next we have James Murn, followed by Jo Beth Dudley, and then Haley Jones.
The plans actually show fill-in wetlands in 6 properties, not 4 as indicated by the applicant. Also, the plans show areas not delineated within these properties, which is unusual because the applicant needs to show that he avoided wetlands. So how do you do that if you haven't identified all the wetlands? Also, if you wanted to avoid wetlands on this property, I think you would put the landfill in the place of the existing quarry. Another issue here is many states have outlawed landfills as far back as 1990. Why has New Hampshire not done that? Is it because Waste Management Division of DES receives $1 for every ton of landfill? Could that be? Is it because DOT receives prorated highway tax money? I think that could be an issue. So, what is the real benefit here? The benefit is to the landowner. The local towns will be industrialized with 100 loads per day of semi-trucks going through Main Street, Whitefield. Some of them probably sneak through Littleton, through Twin Mountain. That's 200 trips. That is industrialization of small town America. I disagree with the applicant in there's no social, that there is social justice in this. This is located here because we are a small community with less money and less resources. And this is a social injustice project if there ever was one.
Thank you. Thank you. Up next, Jo Beth Dudley.
Hello, I'm Jo Beth Dudley, and I'm speaking as a private citizen, as a resident of Dalton. And I know that many comments will talk about the technical aspects of preserving wetlands. I just want to provide some anecdotes. I grew up here, probably a half a mile from the proposed site of the landfill, maybe a mile, but very close. As a child, I used to go out and be able to catch frogs and tadpoles and snakes, garter snakes, milk snakes. I'd see lots of bats. I'd see lots of bugs. I mean, now I see a few moths. There used to be a ton of moths. I used to see those beautiful big lunar moths. I used to see lots of bumblebees. Now I only see a couple of bumblebees and a few pollinators, even though I try to plant pollinator-friendly plants on my property. Bats, I know there's another problem with the white nose syndrome, but it's rare for me to see one bat where I used to see tons swooping around in the nighttime. Birds, I used to see lots of different species of birds. Common ones such as cardinals. I haven't seen a cardinal appear in Dalton at my property since I was a child. Grosbeaks, common birds. I haven't seen those. I'm not seeing any more of those. And I want to emphasize the fact that wetlands are critical. Very critical. The vernal pools are critical. And all of these are connected. You know, they're all connected. So if we fill however many acres of wetlands that Casella is proposing to do, it's going to impact the whole ecosystem. The ecosystem is connected, and we really need to protect it. This is a beautiful, beautiful part of the country and part of the state. Our economy is built on recreation. That relies on a clean environment and preserving the beauty of this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we'll have Haley Jones, and then Erica Robin Pilot. Sorry if I got that wrong.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Haley Jones. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a community organizer with an environmental health and justice organization called Slingshot. We've been working with folks up in the North Country, in Bethlehem, Dalton, Whitefield, and surrounding towns for the past 20 years, and unfortunately not a lot has changed. I'm going to be submitting written comments as well, so I just love to ask folks 2 process questions, and again, thank you for making the trek up here. So in their permit review process, is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers taking into account the applicant's history at similar sites? For example, would the spillage of thousands of gallons of leachate in Coventry, or the unpermitted release of toxic chemicals into the Ammonoosuc River from the Bethlehem site, or the literal lighting on fire of the Juniper Ridge landfill on Penobscot sacred territory have any weight on this permitting decision, thinking about past mismanagement by this developer? Additionally, will the Army Corps, when reviewing the lengthy list of potential impacts, which by my measure should be pretty much every single one of them, how will you be measuring both quantitatively and qualitatively environmental justice factors? For example, are you going to be looking at socioeconomic factors? Are you going to be looking at access to infrastructure and town budgets? And are you going to be looking at proximity to other polluting sites like the Bethlehem landfill? And finally, since we know environmental justice is as much about process as it is about product, how are you planning to incorporate public hearings and community narratives like this one throughout the process? Thank you guys again for coming out here, and looking forward to your responses.
Thank you. I want to apologize. That was Eric and Robin below.
Yeah, a couple of questions. What are you all going to do with people moving in to the state? Nobody took into factor that they're coming in by groves. Second of all, I think we should check the sewer treatment plants. If they're dumping raw sewage into the rivers, it's going to pollute the rivers. That's a fact that we should look into. Third, she said something about the flooding of Littleton. Well, it's funny because the Army Corps of Engineers put 8 ponds down below Meadowless to stop the flood. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I get the right. Thank you. Up next, we have David Lynch, followed by Jeff and Jackie Costura.
I yielded my time, sir.
Thank you. And then Judy Jessner.
Hi, my name is Dave Lynch, and I'm a resident of Whitefield, just representing myself and my family. So one thing that really concerns me is that this process really emphasizes Dalton, but we forget that there's a whole lot of other surrounding towns that are affected, like Whitefield, where I live. As a matter of fact, part of Forest Lake and Burns Pond, which is part of that watershed, is in Whitefield. So I don't understand why Casella gets to build this horrible waste center that could really harm our community in Whitefield as badly as Dalton, but yet they only talk to Dalton and only offer little benefits to Dalton. I implore you to deny this application, or at least please really do a very thorough deliberative process. I moved my family up here a little over a year ago, thinking that this was going to be a very clean, wholesome place to raise my daughter. We swim in Forest Lake. So many families and local people swim in Forest Lake State Park. If this dump is built right by Forest Lake, it could pollute and ruin Forest Lake, which is like the center of our recreation in this whole area. I mean, this is going to be so damaging economically and to the water as well. So I implore you, deny this application, or at least take as long as possible to really thoroughly consider it, because again, it's going to destroy our place, not only environmentally, but also economically. There are no economic benefits to this, at least for Whitefield and other Bethlehem and other, only harm. So please, cost benefit, I see no benefit, only cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Judy Jessner, followed by Andrea Bryant.
Hi, I'm Judy Gessner. I live in Whitefield, and I have a document from the Selectmen of Whitefield. This has been sent to you in emails as well. I won't read it per se, but I will say Whitefield is very much a part of this whole process. In 2020, at a Whitefield town meeting, the citizens unanimously voted in opposition to the Casella waste system proposed landfill in Dalton. In 2024, we feel the exact same way. One of our biggest concerns is that one of our major wells for our town water will be in the catchment basin of everything that could go wrong at the landfill. And that is our major well. So we are very, very happy to be included in your thoughts, because anyone could be in danger, but we certainly could be in danger. So the Board of Selectmen have requested that you deny this permit based on the stewardship of the irreplaceable value of Whitefield's environment, community health, and quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Andrea Bryant, followed by Marcia Hannon.
Hi, I'm Andrea Bryant. I'm representing the Ammonoosuc River Local Advisory Committee. I was asked to represent them. If you're not aware, the New Hampshire River Management and Protection Program is a partnership created between the state government and local citizens for protection of each designated river, which the Ammonoosuc is. The committee plays a vital role in protecting not only the river, but its shorelands as well. Members are appointed by the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Services. A main responsibility of the advisory committee is to advise local, state, and federal governing bodies and agencies of activities which may affect the water quality or flow of a protected river. We submitted a written comment on May 8th with our concerns explained in detail. But what I'd like to, a rhetorical question is, what other detrimental, let me start over. The environment detriments of this project that we emphasize are not enough to deny the permit. What would be? Some of the issues that we find problematic are the landfill encompass hillside headwater streams that exhibit significant interconnection with groundwater, ultimately feeding the Hatchbrook-Alterbrook tributary, a perennial spring complex that flows into the Ammonoosuc River, and 10 acres of wetland will be disturbed, vernal pools will be impacted, and that will all disturb the trout population of the Ammonoosuc. As you know, there's already another landfill only 5 miles upstream that is discharging into the Ammonoosuc River. It has high levels of PFAS and 1,4-dioxin, which is a known carcinogen. The Ammonoosuc River is used for recreation and Woodsville water supply.
Up next is Marcia Hannon, and then Jean Robilier.
Jeannie Robler had to go home for her dog. Can you put her back, please?
Okay, I'm going to In that case, it would be Pam Lads, and then Elliot Wessler.
I am Marcia
Oh.
Hammond. I'm going to defer to our Conservation Commission to make first statements, and I'll follow up if there's time.
Marcia, I'm going to be on there too, though. You can go down if you want. I'm going to be going up too. I'm on the list. I'll go right ahead and I'll just go.
Good afternoon, folks. Many of you know me as maybe your Dalton rural carrier for many years, but I was elected Coos District number 5 representative in 2012. So I served for 2.5, 3 years. I decided after spending so many hours driving Route 93 that I was instead happier to spend time with my granddaughters. This last week, I had the joy of having my youngest grandson, a 4-year-old, and his family from Los Angeles, who has been cool all summer. They couldn't believe that we were experiencing more heat here than California. And where did we go to cool off? Forest Lake. Forest Lake, and it was the most unbelievably, joyfully, I won't say fulfilling, it was so refreshing is the word I'm looking for. Anyway, I sit on the Whitefield Conservation Commission, and we have had mailing from Calix, or the Environmental Consulting Board head, who is MS Robinette, Senior Consultant. And I'd like to refer not to 11 paragraphs, but just to 1 or 2 paragraphs. And number 1, on paragraph 6, is that the unfield tested theory that dozens of pumping bedrock water supply wells in the vicinity of Forest Lake are hydrogeologically separate from the proposed landfill area. Unified is the word. The discussion of nearby water supplies relies upon this unified tested theory. The release detection monitoring network is devoid of any early warning mechanisms for residents living nearby this proposed landfill. And paragraph number 10, the bedrock fracture pathways need to be field verified and quantified as to their hydraulic conductivities and potential to carry the leachate contaminants to the nearby domestic water supply wells. So as a Whitefield resident, I represent our Whitefieldians that have property along Forest Lake. And secondly, from having been a And educator, I want to bring up the fact that the access road was very much delineated, but it doesn't say which direction it's coming from. And in Whitefield, if it comes down Route 3, it's passing by the elementary school, and it's a very hazardous hill to come down into the town center and make an acute, really, turn to get back uphill and toward Route 116 or the Whitefield Road. So two very big hazards there I wish to delineate. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we've got Pam Lads, followed by Elliot Wesley.
Hi, my name is Pam Lads, and I live in Newport, Vermont. And you might ask, what am I doing here? Well, I live between Plattsburgh and the Bethlehem site, right under the shade of Mount Trashmore, which is how we refer lovingly to the Coventry landfill. I listened to the sales pitch for how much you can all benefit from the logos on t-shirts, the pens with Casella's name on, the contributions to the flowers. Trust me, that does not even begin to cover a fraction of what it's like living under a landfill. I'm really here today, though, as a water warrior. I'm an old water warrior. The scarcest resource we have on this planet is water. I'm an open water swimmer. I spend a lot of time in that stuff. I prefer to swim in water that isn't contaminated. I would hope everybody else does too. If we destroy water, if we destroy a pristine lake, and it's one of a few that are still here, like Forest Lake, we are absolutely batshit crazy. I mean, there is no way, that makes no sense whatsoever. And there is a risk. There is a risk no matter what, no matter how careful you guys are, and I believe you intend being careful, but accidents happen. They've happened in Vermont, they've happened in other states as well. Remember the precautionary principle. Don't risk water, ever.
Thank you. Up next is Elliot Wessler and then Wayne Morrison.
I want to thank the court for putting on this meeting. I have provided, excuse me, I have provided written comments. I expect I will provide additional written comments based on the things I've heard. My original written comments go to the public interest requirements that the Corps will be evaluating. As many people have said, the only benefits I see of this project are private benefits. Casella and its shareholders will benefit. There are a certain number of fairly wealthy landowners in Dalton that will be benefiting. All of the costs are going to be borne by community members and the environment. So I hope the Corps very strongly considers benefit cost as one of the linchpins of their analysis. The thing I want to talk about now is following on, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your last name, Lindsay's presentation, her articulation of the requirement that alternative sites need to be considered. And not only do alternative sites need to be considered, but if there is a practicable alternative site that results in less environmental damage, that site should be chosen rather than the site that the applicant has submitted permits for. If the Corps has not already done so, I urge the Corps to review the applicant's alternative analysis because it's clearly deficient. In my view, the alternative...
Microphone.
Test.
Test.
Test. Bluetooth dongles there again. We get 2 extra minutes, right? No? I think it'll be a whole 2 minutes. No? 10.5.
Folks, we're going to set up a corded mic real quick. I apologize for the technical difficulties.
Testing. I'm going to repeat the last thing I said. If the Corps has not already done so, I urge the Corps to review the applicant's alternative analysis because it's clearly deficient. In fact, I'll venture this opinion I think it's generous to call it a joke. Is first, by Casella and GSL's own admission, this landfill is going to serve a regional, not a local market. GSL has said that up to 49% of the trash landfilled will come from states other than New Hampshire. And it is important to note also that the vast bulk of the state, the in-state trash, that is the trash generated in New Hampshire, will in fact be coming from downstate sources.
We're over time by 30 seconds, sorry.
And yet the only alternative that was specifically evaluated by GSL is 3 alternatives in a very tight band across the North Country. It's very clear that this company wants to buy cheap land to landfill trash that it's collecting in Massachusetts and downstate New Hampshire.
So you pick 3 minutes.
Okay.
But I said I would not give an answer to that.
Good job, man.
Thank you. Up next is Wayne Morrison, followed by Michael Ryan.
Hi, my name is Wayne Morrison. I'm a resident of Whitefield, and in full disclosure, I am president of a group called North Country Alliance for Balanced Change, which is vehemently opposed to this project. With all due respect to Mr. Gay and the folks from Casella, I didn't intend to make a statement, but I have to go back to the beginning. Sometimes it's not what Casella says, it's what they don't say. And in the beginning, I think the comment was made that they selected this site because of the terrific roadways that lead to it. And that could not be further from the truth. Their current landfill at NCS is off of Route 93, 1 exit, and you're there. The current proposed landfill brings 100+ trash haulers through small rural communities that are ill-suited to that task and put families, children, people in facilities like hospitals and retirement homes at great risk. So that assumption is completely false. Secondly, there's always assumptions made by Casella that they don't need any local permits. And I can tell you that from a legal perspective, that is very much not the case. And we are going to fight that through court. And thirdly, at no point in the presentation by Casella did they highlight to you that 50% of the trash is going to be coming 150 miles from Massachusetts with a ridiculous carbon footprint. And if that's serving the people of Dalton, I don't want free trash pickup, and I don't want Massachusetts trash. So please stop telling us about these ridiculous benefits. The question I wanted to ask, and we're glad that the Army Corps is involved. I don't know if the Army Corps is aware, but there's been a lot of testimony from certified hydrogeologists that not enough testing has been done at the site. And one of my questions to the Army Corps is, how are you going to do your research? Most of the testing that's been done in the permitting process is at the very surface at the landfill. Those of us who live around the lake have wells that are 300 feet deep. We are very concerned that nobody is doing testing that can really describe the pathways of what happens underneath the bedrock and which way that water is going to go. And I would ask the Army Corps, what's the process? Are you going to do field work? How do you review this? Do you have a question? No. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Selectman Thomas Dubril. I apologize if I got that wrong, sir, followed by Frank Lombardi.
Can you call my name? Michael Ryan?
Oh, Michael Ryan? I apologize.
Thank you. Resident of Dalton. Landfills have been around for a long time. They've learned how to make them better. They've learned to make them better. This landfill is going to have 2 liners in it, and I think that's going to be an asset to the landfill. Thank you.
All landfills leave.
Thank you. Up next is Thomas Dubril, and I apologize again if I got that wrong. Okay, he had to go home, thank you. In that case, up next is Frank Lombardi, followed by Mary Menzies.
Thank you. So I'm Frank Lombardi, Chair of the Whitefield Conservation Commission. And the Whitefield Conservation Commission does have some concerns. We're concerned about the water impacts, and I'm going to just shorten this up. But you guys have a copy of this, I believe, on file, and I can give you this hard copy as well. We are concerned about the water impacts, traffic, pollution, and congestion, air pollution, our recreation and tourism, and one of the things that was interesting here that we've been discussing is how this site is in its natural state. And I think a lot of landfills, when they come in and say, let's clean up this area, and because most of the landfills up here are unlined. So if we can get a landfill picked up and then put a line underneath it and fix it, I mean, that's a solution. But I think in this situation, it's in its natural state. So I think that's just a different element that is something to look at. And of course, Forest Lake nearby and Burns Pond, which goes into the Little River, which goes by the Robinson Well, and that goes into most of our drinking water. That is our drinking water. So those are our main concerns. We have that here, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Up next, we have Mary Menzies, followed by Heidi Tremarco.
Hi, I'm Mary Menzies. I'm a citizen of the Town of Littleton. We haven't heard anything from any Littleton people here tonight, so I thought I would speak. I am on the planning board there, but I'm not representing the planning board. I'm just representing myself. But I would like to point out a couple of things about Littleton. We are not going to be impacted as much as Whitefield and Bethlehem and Dalton, but we are downstream in the Ammonoosuc, and we do anticipate to be impacted by the truck traffic and potential accidents. I'd also like to point out that the citizens of Littleton overwhelmingly voted in a warrant article a couple of years ago in opposition to the landfill. And our Conservation Commission has sent a letter in opposition to this. I don't know if anyone from our Conservation Commission is on the schedule to speak, but just in case, I thought I would mention that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Up next is Heidi Tremarco, followed by John Tuthill.
Hello, my name is Heidi Tremarco with the Conservation Law Foundation, and we will be submitting written comments, but I will summarize those for the Corps' review tonight. First and foremost, given the significant size and scope of this project, it requires an environmental impact statement. And so we will be looking for the Corps' full review of the project in an EIS. I'll note the project calls for the destruction of at least 11 acres of wetlands and the clearing of 90 acres of forest, which I haven't heard Casella discuss much, but I have found in their filings, and I think it's very notable that they plan to clear cut, or as their description is, convert 90 acres of forest to unforest. The Corps must also consider the project as a whole. It can't consider segmentation, as the Corps is aware. And so they must consider Casella's reasonably foreseeable plans to expand the landfill. Casella now says it's going to operate for 18 years, but we all know the plan is to expand the landfill again and again and again. This is what happened in Bethlehem. We don't have to look far. It's incredibly foreseeable to know that this is their business plan. And this was their plan when they first submitted the application years ago. The first plan called for it to be developed in 3 phases. At the state's request, they withdrew that application and resubmitted the first stage. So we're just looking at the first stage now. We need to look at the larger impact, which is originally called for 137, 140 acres of landfill, not 70 acres. The comments will detail our concerns of the significant harm to the waters and the environment, and that Casella has not demonstrated a sufficient alternatives analysis. Most recently, the evidence of that is the state's request to Casella to provide more alternatives information just this past Monday. They certainly have not demonstrated the LEPA standard. As you've heard tonight, there's no public benefit. New Hampshire does not need another landfill. As we've been fighting the NCES expansions, we've clearly demonstrated we have sufficient capacity.
I'll cede my time if she needs more time.
I'll make it very fast. I think as part of the public interest review, it will be very important for the Corps to consider the company's dismal performance record at their other facilities, Coventry and NCES most specifically. As we know, there was a letter of deficiency just issued to Casella in the past week or so. The Corps must also consider the fate of the leachate that will be leaving the facility. As we know, Casella is shipping huge volumes of leachate to other facilities in the state, currently to the Manchester wastewater treatment facility, which is not equipped to handle this leachate, including very large volumes of PFAS, which is then just released into the Merrimack River or incinerated and released into the air. And this is a very serious concern. The Merrimack River is within the scope of the Corps' review. It is a water of the United States. And as we also know from Bethlehem, if the Corps is not satisfied and if Casella hasn't demonstrated a plan to deal with this leachate, they will hold it on site. And there was a letter of deficiency letter addressing this very specific practice of behavior that Casella has of holding that leachate in unsafe ways on site as it gathers. And they're generating huge volumes of leachate. We urge the Corps to hold a public hearing. And I'm very interested, last but not least, in the meaningful engagement that's planned tonight for environmental justice concerns, and we're questioning who are the stakeholders that are being consulted in this environmental justice, what communities are being consulted. And I hope there is real meaningful engagement with the people who will be asked to bear the burden of the landfill, the people that can...
exercise of discretion, I'd urge you to let the lady continue.
This is my last, the people that will smell it, hear it, that will bear the traffic impacts, and the people in downstream communities who will bear the burden of the PFAS contamination in the leachate, specifically the communities in Manchester and Nashua. They must be included in that environmental justice meaningful discussion. Thank you.
Next we have John Tuthill, followed by Mark Jacobs.
Thank you very much. John Tuthill from Ackworth, New Hampshire. I will be very brief. I'd just like to second everything we've just heard. Public hearing is essential. Environmental impact statement review is also essential. And I strongly urge the Corps to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Mark Jacobs, followed by Lucy Golden.
Gene Robilart's back too.
Is Mark Jacobs here? Is Lucy Golden here?
So I didn't intend to speak tonight, but I was so motivated by the presentation that I thought, oh, I better say something. So my name's Lucy Golden. I've lived in the North Country for 40 years, and I've had a business here for 35 years. What motivated me to speak tonight was the list of what the Corps of Engineers looks at for considerations, and I think I counted 19. I wrote them down here on a slide. And honestly, I couldn't see one that would support putting in the Granite State landfill in, not one. The only benefit I can see for anybody in doing it is for Casella and their shareholders, and I don't think that's a very good reason to do this, and I'm guessing I'm not alone in that. The factor I want to focus on here, though, and I could go into every single one of them in detail, but having watched Bethlehem for all these years, but I won't, is the economic impact. As a small business owner, I know that the North Country relies on our clean, our pristine natural environment. It brings tourists, it always has, it's been going on for 150 years anyway. So the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry, retail, the outdoor recreation industry, and then people like me. I'm a crafts person and I sell through local venues, and I also sell through stores like galleries in the North Country. That we rely on these people, and we've already survived Bethlehem with what's that's meant, but we're kind of done here. And to have yet another mega landfill bringing in, I think what I read was up to 49%, according to Casella in one application I saw, could be out-of-state trash. And that's not including southern New Hampshire, which is a good 100 miles away and much more densely populated. So we're going to become the trash mecca. We don't need it. The people who've lived here and have businesses here do not need it. Please honor us and the community and don't allow this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Timothy Egan. And then after that, we'll try to find Thomas Dubrill.
Thank you. As you said, I'm Timothy Egan. I'm a landowner and homeowner in Sugar Hill for the last 23 years. I'm on the board of the COAS Economic Development Corporation and a member of the New Hampshire-Canada Trade Council. I'm also a member of the Coffin Pond Committee, which is fed by the Ammonoosuc and Gale Rivers, as part of the Sugar Hill Conservation Commission, all who have concerns about this project. I'm a former member of the House of Representatives from 2018 to 22, representing Franconia, Sugar Hill, Lisbon, Lyman, and Monroe, and I say that because I have two important questions. While Casella has made it clear that their payments, perks, and offerings to Dalton in return for the landfill impacts the town, I see there are no considerations to the other towns in northern Grafton or southern Coast counties where the predominantly out-of-state trash is trucked in through Interstate 93 and 91. So my two questions are, for the Corps, how is this regional impact being evaluated in your permit process evaluation? And for Casella, how is mitigation to the surrounding towns being addressed? I can tell you that the town of Sugar Hill recently dealt with MBI, Casella's transportation partner, and their improper operations in Sugar Hill to the point where their operation was closed and moved away related to their facility in Bethlehem. And the town of Sugar Hill voted to not support this project. I'd be interested to know how the regional impacts will be evaluated. So those are my two questions.
Yes.
Would you like to address those now or afterwards? We'll address those afterwards.
Thank you.
We've hit the end of folks who did not cede their time. We got a couple comment cards out here.
Jean Robles back.
Jean,
Sorry, I have a dog.
All right. I'd like to give Jean Robillard the chance since she was first.
I think sort of French.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a dog. I wasn't planning on being here all night. So I'm Jeannie Robillard. I am a survivor from Bethlehem. I have 22 years of experience with NCES, and not a single bit of it is good, which is why I'm here tonight. I've moved to Whitefield. I live on the lake now. I live on Burns Pond. It's my dream house. I have worked 40 years to get there. And I guess I'm wondering why the rights of a corporation who's out to make a buck should outweigh my rights that I have worked for and this home for 40 years. Now, every year, so I would like the court to really consider that. Whose rights are we serving here? Why is a corporation's rights more valuable or more important than mine and all I have worked for? So every year, because I live on the lake, I get information from the town and from DES. They send me this nifty little pamphlet about got clean drinking water, it's up to you. And they tell me all the things that I can and cannot do on my property because I live in a source water protection area. Now we know Burns Pond is intimately connected to Forest Lake through aquifers and streams and marshland. So what's happening in Forest Lake is going to happen in Burns Pond too. And it is a source water protection area. And I'm going to quote this little pamphlet that they send me, where it says, once a source becomes contaminated, it is very costly and sometimes impossible to correct. Impossible. Therefore, I'm writing to you because your property is located blah, 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 and any contaminants are likely to flow to the water system's well or surface water. This can affect the public water supply. Now, my home is 150 feet, I gotcha, from the water, and just another 50 feet from that, I can stand in my driveway and the DES would permit me to put a landfill there. I think that is astounding. Absolutely astounding. And I am also astounded that the DES or that the Army Corps of Engineers would even consider this project so close to many water sources, not just Forest Lake. Everyone is going to be infected. It's regional. I hope you consider it as a regional project as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we'll have Nancy Morrison, followed by Tom Tower.
Thank you. Thank you. I must admit I was a little naive on this when I heard it was called a question and answer. I thought you'd be answering my questions immediately. So I look forward to getting answers to my question in some form at some point. Anyway, I'll give you my two questions. Thank you. My name is Nancy Morrison. I'm from Mount Vernon and Whitefield, New Hampshire, and I thank you very much for listening to my questions. Casella has told you, Army Corps of Engineers, that this landfill project is necessary. The New Hampshire recent biennial report put out by New Hampshire DES says New Hampshire has waste capacity through 2034 and into 2050, at least with expected expansions at other landfills in the state. And with the recent updated solid waste management plan by DES, it states that if we reach the proposed goals of 25% waste reduction by 2030 and 45% by 2050, we will reduce waste by 650,000 tons of waste per year, and we may never need a landfill. So my question to you is, where do you see the public benefit for New Hampshire in this proposed project? My other quick question is, how will you take into account and weigh the impact of scavenger bird feces in Forest Lake, which is adjacent to the proposed landfill? It is presently one of the most pristine lakes in the state, and many residents still drink from it. Scavenger birds have very powerful feces, which are highly polluting and carry high amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus, which feeds algae blooms, which can eventually lead to no swimming, no drinking, of the water and dead aquatic life. Thank you. So again, how will you take into account and weigh the impact of scavenger birds? Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Tom Tower.
Thank you, and thank the Army Corps for being here and for this process. My name is Tom Tower. I'm a resident of Whitefield and also serve as the Vice President of North Country Alliance for Balanced Change. We do intend to submit written comments by July 3rd, and I think I'm safe in saying that it would take slightly longer than 2 minutes to review those comments, so I'll let that process play out. I have just one basic question, and then I'll urge a couple of things. Can the Corps identify any permits that it has either approved or denied for landfills in the last 10 years? And the follow-up to that is, if you have, can you please provide a copy of that so that the public would have an opportunity to review that process? And then lastly, I'll just urge what others have urged, the impact statement. And we sure would like a public hearing, because this is pretty darn important to the people of the North Country. So, thank you.
And we have one online who preferred not to use the chat. We're going to see if we can get the audio on his moment here. Just a second. All right, JC, why don't you see if you can get this to work? JC, you're up if you want to make those verbal comments.
Can you hear me? Yes. Are you able to hear me?
It's limited. If you could speak up as best you can, otherwise we'll have to read it out verbally. But try it one more time.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. Jackie Elliott, native Granite Stater, transplanted to Maine, dealing with Casella. You have heard from the public tonight what the interest is that is public. It is the public. Thank you for this gathering tonight. Please proceed with a public hearing, because there is much that is vital that must be dealt with here. I have concerns that the Army Corps being involved at this point has the cart well before the horse. I'm even questioning whether it is the right horse or the cart. This process around this proposed landfill has been going on for years. The citizens have made it very clear and with well-grounded information and concerns about why this landfill should not be constructed. Mr. Gay made a point to mention Casella's strong presence in New Hampshire. Casella has a strong presence in the region, the operative word being strong. This raises concerns because he's also quite taken with the fact that there are robust travel lanes with this proposed landfill. And as you have heard, nearly 50% of what gets landfilled in New Hampshire comes from outside New Hampshire's borders. So Casella is looking at profits, and the people of the North Country of New Hampshire are looking at their very lives, their rights to clean water, their rights to clean air, their rights to a quality of life. The choices being made here are not about jots and tittles on permits and reviews. They are decisions about how people get to experience their lives. We've heard the term environmental justice. it must be taken seriously. The North Country of New Hampshire has been a sacrifice zone long enough. I would hope that the Army Corps would not be partial to continuing that legacy. Listen to the people. The people have spoken, and the public interest is what the people have spoken. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and please consider your role in this very carefully and keep the process open to the public for participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. We have one other comment from the chat online from Jim McClammer. My concern is primarily over process. The New Hampshire DES has determined that the wetland application is incomplete. Once it is deemed complete, is it possible to reopen the comment period? And again, that question, that's from Jim McClammer via the online chat.
Thank you. At this time, before I open the floor to any additional comments, there are two people who ceded their time so that others could speak. I would like to offer them a chance to make their comments. First, I would like to call up Jeff Construa.
Could I speak from here? I have a problem with my wife says I have a big enough mouth, so I'm ready to be able to hear me. Okay. My main concerns, I already submitted comments in writing. My main concerns are the something that's kind of new to me. I'm familiar with administrative law, but this environmental justice impact, I think is quite significant, especially with this particular project. I mean, if you talk about environmental justice, one of the things that the Corps talks about in some of the readings that I've done is, treating all people fairly without regard to income. Okay? Now here we have a question of a large mega company versus small property owners, essentially. Okay, and we also factor in the fact that there's a state park that's open to all for recreation for a clean lake. So this seems to comport with the goal of fair distribution among social groups of environmental quality of life. I would ask the Army Corps of Engineers to remember what their obligations are. I say that respectfully. And also, I think it's pretty obvious that we have factors here. One lady, I forget who it was, came up and said she couldn't find a single thing on the 19 counts that would, call for approval. I don't pretend to be able to juggle 19 things in my head anymore at my age, but I do have concerns about air pollution probable, water pollution quite possible, with some of the people I asked you to use you as the presiding officer, use your discretion to allow her to continue, and you graciously did so. That the water pollution, water flows downhill is a very simple scientific term, scientific concept, but I think it's apropos here. And also the obvious noise pollution of 1,000 vehicles coming in and out, not only in Dalton, not only in that particular road, and not only adjacent to my property, for full disclosure, but also to all the surrounding towns. And I would also say it's pretty probable that there's going to be animal harm here. I don't pretend to be a wetland scientist or environmental engineer, but I think I was born with enough common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. The next comment will be from John Swan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Army Corps, for coming to the North Country. Welcome to the beautiful North Country. I hope you get a chance to go out and visit Forest Lake State Park. It truly is a gem. Heidi Tremarco as CLF pretty much covered the main points I wanted to make about segmentation of the impacts based on the initial application submitted a couple years ago. We know that this is not going to be an 18-year landfill only. So I hope the Army Corps will consider all the impacts, including wetlands and future expansions of this
facility. At the same time, I would like to ask the Army Corps if did you see a trend here tonight with this audience? I just want to make sure that's noted, that there was a trend tonight. And I don't know, did you also note the large crowd out front? Thank you. Just want to make sure. But lastly, I would just ask the Corps, please, take into account this company, this operator, this engineering expertise. Look at the Bethlehem landfill. Judge this project based on how Bethlehem is. What are they leaving behind in the town of Bethlehem? 30 years of strife and controversy. And I ask you, why can't they just expand the landfill there in Bethlehem? It's because the citizens of Bethlehem don't want it. And now I don't believe they would be able to because of the widespread PFAS contamination that's showing up at the groundwater monitoring wells within the watershed of the Ammonoosuc River. And in June, on June 13th, I actually went into the river again and tested surface water runoff from the property for PFAS. 5 PFAS were detected. It's the same as my testing in October of 2023, which is also the same PFAS compounds found predominantly in Casella's NCS landfill leachate. So there's something going on. They're discharging directly into the Ammonoosuc River, and I just ask you to consider the history and the condition of NCS when you're weighing the merits of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, are there any more registered comments? Yes, ma'am. You can come on up. Please state your name.
I'm Jody Blaney from Bethlehem, New Hampshire. I'm a native of Littleton, New Hampshire, and we've had a family cottage on Forest Lake for generations. So very much a native. I feel like all of us here tonight, almost all, that have spoken tonight, we are the voices of the water. We're the voices of Burns Pond, Forest Lake, the Ammonoosuc River. You know, the river speaks. You hear it at night, you hear it during the day, you hear the joy of the people, children playing at Forest Lake State Park. I was one of the first female lifeguards at Forest Lake State Park back in 69, 70, 71. But my point is, we speak for the water. I guess that's my main point. So I really hope you can hear that in this crowd and in the many other public hearings that you hopefully will have. Thank you.
Thank you. The time is now 6:52. Do we have any more comments in the room? We may have time for one more. Sorry, you've gone already, Stephanie?
But it's different because before I was representing somebody.
I'd like to ask somebody who hasn't gone yet. Yes, please.
I'm going to stand from here, if that's okay.
I can't hear you all the time.
I'm Linda Massanilla, and I'm from Littleton. And I have a couple of questions people might want to think about. If 80% of New Hampshire's land is suitable for a landfill, why would you select the 14% that is not to put a landfill in? And the other thing is, we know that there's a designated route for the trucks to go through Bethlehem and then go through Whitefield to the site that is proposed. But if you owned a trucking company, why would you want to pay more fuel costs and wear and tear on your equipment to go the longer route when Littleton is a shorter route and it would cost you less? And my question is, who's going to monitor Littleton for the truck traffic that we all know will take place? Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to bring up Tammy Turley, the chief of our regulatory division.
I want to thank everyone again for participating and providing your very thoughtful comments and concerns. I just want to address a couple of the comments related to our process. There were a couple questions regarding how we might see benefits. We're so early in the process, we haven't made any determinations. That will come throughout our process. One thing we've noted, comparing our process to many state processes, is when we start our public interest review, we need very few pieces of information to put out our public notice. And that's because we want input from the public so we can decide what factors to dig deeper into, what considerations that we need to think about. So many of the things that were suggested tonight, like alternatives analysis, we have not fully reviewed nor made any determinations on the alternatives analysis. Many of these things we're still reviewing, and again, I'll highlight we are very early in the process. I also wanted to point out the difference between a public meeting and a public hearing. In many cases, if we decide to hold a public hearing, the public is disappointed because we don't answer questions. We provide information about our process, and then we listen to comments. So we like to take a first step, which is tonight, to provide us a little bit more opportunity to explain our process, answer a few questions regarding our process that might be helpful for the public to understand. So this is our first step. Regarding environmental justice, we take that very seriously. This is the first time we have ever planned a separate meeting to sit down and really focus on environmental justice concerns. So we really appreciate your comments, suggestions, recommendations, how we might provide meaningful engagement. If there were some communities adjacent to where we are that weren't notified, we're happy to notify and provide that meaningful engagement. So tonight is our first try, our first step, and we're happy to take recommendations of how we might improve on that process. Lindsay mentioned the list of state evaluation and state permits that are required before we can make a decision. The lady on the phone mentioned the cart before the horse. We started our evaluation process because we received a complete application. That doesn't take away the fact that we still rely on the state process and the 4 or 5 evaluation factors and permits that are required from the state before we can make our final determinations of whether it's appropriate to authorize the fill in waters of the United States. Let's see. I did want to point out also that when Congress provided the different authorities for the Clean Water Act, it was the Army Corps of Engineers that was provided authority for Section 404, and that's the discharge of dredged or fill material. So you can think of that kind of like a construction-related permit, the actually placing material into a water body for a specific purpose. So we evaluate the essentially making that water body dry land or changing it in some other way. What we don't have authority to regulate is the operation of facilities. So we don't have authority to monitor or manage the operation of a landfill. That would be the state's authority. So the other sections of the Clean Water Act were delegated mostly to EPA, and then EPA delegated those down to the states. So that would be the 401 Water Quality Certification and the 402 National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. As you know, the landfill permit or solid waste land permit, that lands with the state. And so we rely on the state to conduct that review. And then our ultimate decision based on the state's review is, will the proposed impacts to waters that are under our purview, will that result in an exceedance of state water quality standards? So the state would evaluate and make that determination, and we need that to make our final conclusion related to our permit. I hope I explained that well. I was confusing myself while I was talking. I think I hit on most of the clarifying things regarding our process. There were a lot of questions related to benefits, and again, we haven't made any determinations. We're still very early in our public interest review.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
If all the other parties to this, with authority, were to approve, is it theoretically possible for the Army Corps of Engineers to deny?
We do have criteria that would force us to deny, yes.
Okay,
yeah, it is possible.
Even though everyone else had approved?
It's possible, yes.
Thank you.
EIS?
Oh, question. There were several comments regarding a request to conduct an EIS. Many times we start a NEPA process, public interest review, which is what we're conducting now. We start a process under an environmental assessment. The conclusion of an environmental assessment is a finding of no significant impact, which means an environmental assessment was appropriate, or we can conclude under that environmental assessment that there was a finding of significant impact. And that would lead us to start the EIS process. So we typically start our review under environmental assessment and then make a conclusion from there.
Is an EA mandatory? Will you be doing an EA?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that
Is
question.
an environmental assessment mandatory? Will you be doing one?
Yes, we will either do an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. Again, we start with that environmental assessment to make a finding of whether or not there are significant impacts.
Can you say something about how long this process you expect it to take? What's the time from now to when you make a decision one way or the other?
That varies widely based on the complexity of the project, the size of the project. I will just give you some numbers. Some of our individual permit evaluations are about 120 days, 160 days. Others are years. So it's hard to say the length of time, especially with a project that might have some additional complexity.
Can I just add that there's a reason why we recommended the White Mountain Regional High School to hold this as opposed to in here. As you can see, it's very hot in here.
Can I ask a follow-up question about, I was one of the people who asked about the EJ Roundtable tonight. Did you say how environmental justice groups or individuals were identified and invited for tonight? Sure. And then you said if we think there are people who are left out, we could like know. Will EPA commit to holding will the Army Corps commit to holding a follow-up with those that identified environmental justice groups?
Sure, thanks, that's a great question. So there's a couple tools that we use to identify environmental justice community. The Council on Environmental Quality holds one tool. We take a look at that and see if there are environmental justice communities in the vicinity of our projects we're evaluating. And then EPA also has a screening tool. So we looked at both of those tools. We also talked with our partners at EPA and New Hampshire DES to identify any groups that we may reach out to invite and make sure we're reaching the right audience. And yes, we will commit to having another meaningful engagement if anyone was left out. Again, this is our first time scheduling a meeting specific for EJ.
Can you say which groups were invited tonight?
I can't off the top of my head, but we do have a list. Thank you.
Is that discussion only by invitation?
No, it's a public meeting, absolutely. We do want to focus on those environmental justice concerns. Yep. And we'll take one more question because I think we're up against our time, and then I think we all need a breather and reset the room. Thank you.
You were going to address my question from before, which is how are you evaluating regional mitigation of the transportation of truck waste into this facility?
Yeah, I don't think I can answer that in a very direct way. I think your question was more related to how we look at the impact of different communities versus the one adjacent to. It's all part of our evaluation. If we have information that we should evaluate something in a particular area, then we'll add that to our evaluation. Again, we're still collecting information to see where we should be focusing our review. Thank you. And thanks, I really appreciate all the great questions.
We did have one note in the chat, just if you have specific comments and about our process that you think need to be addressed, email is a good way. There's an email listed on the QR code and on the public notice, so if you need that after, please feel free to track any of this down and we can get you that if you have specific questions.
We've heard many thoughtful statements here this evening. Careful analysis will be required to come to a determination and before a decision can be rendered. I'd like to thank everybody for attending the public meeting today. Thank you for your interest and participation. The next meeting will begin at 7:30. That is that environmental justice meeting that people had just talked about. We will ask that you give us a chance to reset the room and also use the bathroom, call our children ourselves. And then we'll meet back up again at 7:30 in this room. That being said, for those of you leaving, I do want to thank you for your time, and I also want to thank the Coos County Sheriff's Department for coming out here tonight and supporting us, as well as the Town of Dalton for letting us use this facility. Thank you very much. All right. Looks as though we're settling down. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would ask again, this meeting's going to be a little bit more informal. I would ask if you're comfortable to please move up towards the front so our regulators can address you.
And we do still have a few stragglers online that would, I'm sure, love to hear your thoughts. So if you can speak up, we don't have a roving mic now, but we'll do our best to kind of accommodate that.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to our Environmental Justice Roundtable. My name is TJ Atwell. I'm the Outreach Manager for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in New England, and I'll be your moderator and facilitator. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to the people at our front table. Going in order, we have Stephen Rochette. He is our technical advisor. And then we have Tammy Turley, the chief of our regulatory division. And then we have Lindsay Lefebvre, the project manager evaluating this project. And we have Stephanie Morrison, the assistant project manager evaluating this project. The purpose of this roundtable event is to hear from you. And to begin, I will open the floor to Tammy Turley, our regulatory division chief.
Thank you. I first want to ask, is there anyone that is joining us now that didn't attend the public meeting? So we've got a couple people. Okay. I was deciding whether or not to repeat some of the things I mentioned earlier, and I absolutely will now. I want to make sure everyone is fully informed. Again, my name is Tammy Turley. I'm the Regulatory Division Chief for the New England District Corps of Engineers. I want to welcome everyone to the Environmental Justice Roundtable. Even though we're not at a roundtable, we're in a room, and our goal tonight is to provide meaningful engagement. But we want you to define what meaningful engagement is. We have registration sheets we can use if needed. We would rather have a free-flow event and have you raise your hand and provide some concerns, ask questions, and just engage with us over the next hour. So we're looking for you to tell us how you would like to be engaged. What's meaningful engagement to you? Again, just to follow up about our process, the Corps of Engineers has made no decisions regarding the permit application. It's our responsibility to evaluate both the environmental and socioeconomic impacts prior to our decision. So you are a big part in that. We're conducting our public interest review, and we want to hear from you to make sure we fully consider all of the things you bring up during this process. This is your opportunity to provide your views verbally, or if you'd like to in writing. We're happy to take those pieces of information in writing. As a reminder, the Corps of Engineers is neither an opponent nor an advocate for the project. We're an impartial party evaluating the project under our permit application procedures and our regulations. The record of this meeting will remain open until July 3rd. We ask that you provide comments. I did make a commitment earlier. If there is a community or group that we didn't reach out to or didn't get a notice that we are offering meaningful engagement, let us know. Let us know if meaningful engagement means less than 10 people. Is it outside? We can walk outside if you want. What does that mean? I want to walk outside. What does that mean to you? And we'll be happy to provide that. At this time, I'll turn it over to Lindsay Lefebvre, the project manager, and she'll provide an overview of our evaluation process. Thank you.
Most of you were here for this earlier, so I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet this time. If you have any questions about it, let us know. I'm Lindsay Lefebvre. I am the project manager that will be evaluating the Granite State Landfill. for the New England District. I just want to point out that the mission of the core regulatory program is to protect the nation's aquatic resources while allowing economic development through fair and balanced decisions. Next slide. Oh, I think back up one more. Okay. So those are the laws and regulations that we have to comply with when we make a decision on a project. Only those highlighted in bold are the ones that we have to comply with for this project. That we don't have any essential fish habitat in the project area. So currently we are in the NEPA evaluation process. We are also under the Section 106 National Historic Preservation Act, consulting with New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources, as well as the Wampanoag tribe and Narragansett tribe for any tribal concerns. They both have been notified at this point in time. Too fast.
Oh, sorry.
I'll try and go faster. The last one is the Endangered Species Act. The two species, federally endangered species on the site are the Canada lynx and the northern long-eared bat, and we will consult with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for any impacts to those species. So the authorities we have for reviewing projects is Section 10, the Rivers and Harbors Act, and then Section 404, the Clean Water Act. It's important to note that for this project, we're only looking at Section 404. There are no Section 10 waters on the site. So we regulate under Section 404, we regulate discharges of dredged and fill materials in waters of the United States. Next slide. So this slide is explaining what is dredged or fill material. Fill material is replacing any portion of the waters of the United States with dry land or changing the bottom elevation of the waters of the United States. And those pictures are just examples of what can be considered fill. They're not relevant to this project, some of them, but just an example so you can see. Next slide.
Why wouldn't trash be considered fill?
It's under a different section of the Clean Water Act. We only have 404 of the Clean Water Act.
What I mean, is it specific in the statute that it's mutually exclusive?
It is. It's based on the purpose of the fill and then the result. Does it change the bottom
So
elevation
under
of the
no
water?
circumstances can you consider, under no circumstances can you consider trash of any kind to be?
That's in our regulation, it specifically states, it's almost a direct citation.
Yeah, I put the citation up here because it is applicable to this project, 33 CFR 323.2. So you can find more information there about it. But you let us next segue to this slide. We'll go back. I think we're done with that one. Somebody's excited. All right, so what is not fill material? Dredging or excavation in inland waters, cutting or removing vegetation above the ground, pile driving, trash and garbage.
Lindsay?
Get a question.
We didn't hear, you said there was two tribes. Could you just, it was the Wampanoag?
Yeah, and I think I messed it up the first time. It's the Wampanoag and then the Narragansett tribe.
And the Narragansett? Not the Abenaki?
No, they're not a federally recognized tribe.
They are not. Yep. So,
And what does it mean that you notified the Wampanoag?
What?
What does it mean that you notified?
We sent them a letter with a project description and location, and they have 30 days to provide us with any comments or concerns. And we did not hear back from them within 30 days or to date. If they were to send us a comment during our review period, outside of that 30 days, we would definitely take a look at it.
And who do you notify?
Bettina Chasen? No, sorry, that's our admin. What's her name? Bettina Washington, sorry.
I do that all the time.
That's right. I'm sorry, who?
Bettina Washington.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. But just with all due respect, it's the Abenaki that are actually live in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And though I know they're not federally recognized, they have come to the table before on this project, and they should be invited again.
Okay, we will make sure to reach out to them. We actually have worked closely with them on another project on the seacoast, and they're very involved with that and provide great comments. So we'll note that and reach out to them. Thanks. I think you had
Do you consider are all these projects an individual event? For example, there's another landfill 5 miles away. Does the Corps consider the cumulative impact of a landfill that even as it's closing, we have to worry about for the next 100 years in terms of its impact? I guess this is a segment on environmental justice. My question is, it's kind of like a chemical thing. If 5 different plants are all emitting stuff, we want to know the cumulative effect, and I'm just wondering how that plays with those things.
Yeah. Every time we issue a permit, particularly an individual permit, which we are looking at here, we do a cumulative impact assessment, and the cumulative impact assessment looks at like projects in a given watershed or a given area or a given region, and looks at those impacts in that watershed. So we look at all the other permits in the area for a given period of time. So the answer to that would be yes, as well as a lot of other permits for other issues.
Just a question, so I'm a little confused just at some of the things you all can and can't regulate. So if there are concerns, for example, about PSAPs and other contaminants leaching into Forest Lake and Burns Pond and the drinking water and so forth, after this is built, could you all deny the permit of building the thing because of the environmental risks of what will happen after it's built? Or are you all only concerned about what happens during the construction phase, but if after it's constructed, if it leaks and contaminates our drinking water and so forth, is that not under your jurisdiction? I'm just confused on that.
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer because you're asking us to draw a conclusion right now, and as my boss said, we're still gathering information to make decisions like that, or to see if we should be making decisions like that. Okay, does that make sense?
But can you make a decision? Like, does that fall even under your regulatory authority as well?
So this might be helpful. We've mentioned a couple times all the different review processes that we rely on. Other folks are trained to be experts in groundwater and solid waste, and we're trained differently to evaluate different things. So we typically condition our permit to say you must abide by this and you must abide by that. So if they're not abiding by all those other state and local actions, then they're technically out of compliance with our permit as well, because we depend on that, if that answers your question.
But didn't you say, in response to one of my questions, that you could deny something based upon the cumulative effect? I don't know if it works or not. Okay.
We can.
You could deny even if everybody else fell in line.
That's right. We have a couple instances that would require us to deny a permit. One, if the project is determined to be contrary to the public interest, so that's one factor. Another factor is not being in compliance with the 404B1 guidelines, and that's where we make a couple different determinations, but specific to this project, it would be determining that the proposal is the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative, and again, we haven't done a thorough review of the alternatives analysis. And that's something we do different from the state and other agencies, where we look at off-site alternatives that might be the least environmentally damaging practicable. So that's a different process that we have that really no one else does.
I know you probably don't have a legal representative here, and I'm not a lawyer myself. Okay, but I'm first in administrative law. Are there any decisions we can look at relative to, let's say, the federal courts? There's a principle called stare decisis. When the law is ambiguous, the first thing you want to do is look at the decisions of the court of competent jurisdiction. Is there any decisions that you're aware of that you could list out that we could review?
What are you asking specifically? What types of decisions?
Well, like for example, you seem universally to say that you couldn't consider garbage under any circumstances.
Oh, there's a lot of case law. I wouldn't say a lot. There's some specific to that, but it's very clear in the regulation that under 404 of the Clean Water Act, we don't regulate garbage.
But when a regulation, is not in compliance with the law, the regulation falls. So there might be, what I'm saying is there could be decisions. Because where I work is on merely unemployment compensation, and the agency promulgated a regulation. that said one thing, and it
Right.
was the exact opposite of law. The board of review reversed it, and they took it to the court, and the court said, no, you can't do by regulation what you're prohibited to do by statute. So what I'm saying is, you like to look at the first impression, not the second impression, not the agency. Not no disrespect, because I know you have a particular expertise in this, so you wouldn't be doing it.
Right.
Okay, but I'd like to see if a court has held that, yeah, you know, it's right. You can't consider trash under any other circumstances.
We can certainly.
Just to a layperson, if you dig a hole and you fill it with trash, you build it. Now, again, that might just be a stupid layperson's first impression, but it might be a court of competent jurisdiction also correct.
We can certainly engage our attorneys and look at that.
If you could publish that on a sheet or something.
Can I ask, maybe to clarify what I forget your name, the gentleman in the red polo. I think he asked, within your review, under your jurisdiction, like, so just looking at the wetlands impacts, do you consider as part of your review just the construction impacts, or do you consider the long-term impacts of the wetlands destruction and the landfill operating in that area? I think that that was part of his question about.
Exactly.
So we consider the direct, indirect, and cumulative effects associated with the activity that's pertinent to our evaluation. So that's the discharge of dredge or fill material into waters of the U.S. So again, relating back to our authority, indirect is later in time and further removed from the direct action. So in that scenario, yes, we would.
Thanks.
But again, there's all the other state actions that are more directly related to, I think, what you're asking about. But yes, direct, indirect, and cumulative would be our responsibility.
Excuse me, but that's where I'm getting confused. If you're willing to consider the flow from the trash into waters of the United States, why wouldn't you be concerned at the beginning portion of that, of putting the trash where it's going to flow, the cumulative particulate or wherever it's going to flow into the United States? It would seem that it would make more sense to say, you know, I'm not going to allow you to dump something in this hole that you're digging in the middle of nowhere. If I know for a fact from, you know, so what are the prospectuses for stocks, right? They say, you know, past performance is no indication of, you know, guarantee of future performance. But sure, how a good indication? If you have somebody who's lost money the last 40 years, I don't know. If you have a company that has problems elsewhere, I don't want them to be able to replicate that same scenario if I reasonably can assume that it's going to lead to that conclusion. And it seems like a lot of this stuff, when you get into, I was very intrigued when I read some stuff about the Army Corps of Engineers. And I've always been, you know, kind of interested in your organization. I've worked about that for a brief period of time. And I was in the military myself, so, you know, I know what Army Corps of Engineers is capable of doing. It's quite remarkable in combat. But you got a scenario here where, why wouldn't you be concerned with what's going in the hole when you're willing to be concerned and you apparently have the authority to be concerned what's coming out of it?
So just if we can clarify, it has nothing to do with concerns, it's our authority. And so we are actually evaluating the discharge of dredged or fill material, and it would be clean material, clean fill, because that's what we can authorize, into the waters that are on the site to construct the landfill liner. So we're not evaluating the solid waste coming in or the leachate that would be discharged after the project is operational. It's to construct the liner and then the infrastructure associated with that, whether that's settling ponds or roads associated with that.
So didn't you say you would also consider the leachate down the line?
We don't directly regulate that, and so in our public interest review process, and you saw the list of items, general water quality concerns, fish and wildlife habitat, all of those things, we generally talk about what another entity is reviewing, and they have reviewed it and perhaps come to a conclusion. And if there are important conditions that we would apply to our permit, if there is a permit decision, then we would add those to our permit.
But doesn't your discretion seem to be a lot wider when you're talking social justice issues?
And if I could, and I think that's the point that I would like to get to. We're going over the technical you know, our process, okay? And what we'd like to know on the social justice side is not how we evaluate the permit, but what are the, what environmental justice communities are there, and who are you, and what are your concerns, okay, on the impacts to you about this project?
So I think TJ is giving me the final countdown. Should it be 9 o'clock? So should I just get through this and then we can keep these great conversations going, or do you want to keep the Q&A back and forth?
If I could just step in for 1 second, we are close to our halfway mark at 7:55. We have to end the meeting at 8:30 because we only have the building until 9, and we do have to clear out. And there are some folks who also registered to make sure that they were heard as well tonight too.
So I'll run through this real quickly and then continue. Is that okay?
Ma'am, did you have a comment? Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, it's just sort of a point of order. What might help is if you could let us know what your definition of environmental justice is, so that we could be speaking to that.
And maybe if we're out of time, we could just turn it over to the people's comments. I don't know if we need the presentation again, unless anybody wants to.
Maybe we can just jump. Stephanie does have a slide that she's going to touch base on environmental justice.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, I will give a brief overview of how environmental justice ties into our regulations.
A little louder, please. We're supposed to be loud. Thanks.
Thank you. So environmental justice is not a new topic for the federal government. This has actually been around since the 90s. But it's gone through a very recent revitalization. I'm sure, as you all know, recently there has been the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in 2021, also known as the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. And it specifically sought to strengthen and accelerate both the federal permitting process as well as the environmental review process. And it does this with 3 key things. The first one is effective, efficient, and transparency to accelerate the delivery and ensure predictability and timeliness. Number 2 is that it is guided by science and information while we are conducting any environmental effects analysis. And lastly, it is shaped by early and meaningful public outreach and communication, especially when rural communities are involved. As I said, there's a revitalization commitment to environmental justice for all that has also happened in 2023. That was an executive order from the president. And it basically directs the federal government to build upon and strengthen its commitment to deliver environmental justice to all communities across America through an approach that is informed by scientific research, high-quality data, and meaningful engagement with communities that have environmental justice concerns. Which brings us to why we are here today. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers most often considers environmental justice under the scope of NEPA and through its compliance process. So environmental justice analysis under NEPA is treated like anything else evaluated under NEPA, and that it is to identify and analyze issues to help us make an informed decision. So that is why we are here today. We are seeking meaningful engagement. We want to provide you all with the opportunity to voice your concerns, to then also be factored in with our science-based analysis to come to a more wholesome conclusion, not just only relying on facts, but relying on input from all of you who will be directly impacted by this project. Which brings us to why we are here today. We want to hear what you have to say. There is actually no strict definition for environmental justice. I was reading through all of our things trying to find that. And it's meant to be broad because every community is different. And we really want you to dictate to us how we can all have meaningful engagement with you to take that back and make an informed decision. Thank you.
Can I ask a threshold question? Has the court considered whether a project may be so violative of environmental justice considerations that if otherwise it might be approved by the court, it would be rejected by the court?
So I heard the word threshold, and one of the evaluation factors, I will say, in environmental justice is whether or not there will be disproportionate impacts to environmental justice communities. And I'll give a classic example of how we were taught to evaluate environmental justice. I'll say in the 90s, because that's when the first executive order came out. And a classic example is a highway going through a city, and the east side is a high-income community, and the west side is a low-income community. And the thought that those two communities don't have equal representation, and so the government that is evaluating that, providing meaningful engagement to both of those communities to give them equal weight and make the process less burdensome for the lower income community. Again, that's a classic example that we learned early in our careers. Also in the 90s, environmental justice was really focused on low-income and minority populations. Now it really is an exhaustive list. It is air quality, water quality, recreation, opportunities for, I'll say, clean recreation. Still low income, high energy costs, education. I'll say air quality is a big one because some of our sister districts that we talk to, there might be a really tough air quality issue in a port, a busy port as an example, and allowing another commercial operation to come in might impact that air quality even more. So that would be allowing that disproportionate effect to an environmental justice community. So we want to know what the concerns that you have are, and I did have a thought. We go to the Council on Environmental Quality's website to look at those environmental justice criteria, if you will, and that's a public tool, right? So that's a public tool you can also look at to see where the communities are in relation to this area that might be considered an environmental justice community, because that's what we do when we start to evaluate a project. I think you had your hand up, sir.
So because water quality is obviously an issue, where does PFAS and the forever chemicals come into play in all this? Because the community has gone out of its way to test private wells in the vicinity of this proposed site, and even using the applicant's own groundwater monitoring well testing of the site, there's no PFAS contamination in the area. And then you compare that to the Bethlehem landfill and the surrounding groundwater monitoring reports, and that entire surrounding watershed is, it's like a Christmas tree in terms of PFAS contamination detection. So, you know, here we are, we're a community that we feel we have the right to clean water, and introducing PFAS-laden trash in a green space where there is no PFAS contamination, that's, I mean...
How's that equitable?
I mean, and if you look at their record, I mean, just this year they've had issues. Coventry, 9,000 gallons spilled. 154,000 gallons in Bethlehem in 2021. They just went through a leachate emergency crisis and got a letter of deficiency for just some crazy stuff they're doing there. And so it's kind of like, what's the threshold for saying this is not going to pass the smell test?
I see a lot of hands up. I'm not sure who to go to first, so I'm just going to go to someone we haven't heard from in this session. Ma'am.
I'm Jo Beth Dudley, a citizen of Dalton. And from what I'm hearing, there are different definitions of environmental justice. I think in the earlier session, we heard a lot of the importance of recreation and the environment in this area to be an area of harm. I think that's really critical. I took a look at the master plan that Dalton updated a year ago, and the North Country Council had done some look at income. And what I see is that over 30% of Dalton households have an income of less than $15,000 a year. And I see that about 67%, 65% of Dalton households have an income of less than $40,000 per year. And I know the poverty rate varies, and the 40,000, it depends on the number of people you have in your household. So if you have, I think, 5 or 6 people in your household, that's the poverty rate. But I think we're an economically disadvantaged community here. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration, as well as the core economy of this area, which is outdoor recreation and the environment. And the other thing, I didn't look at the income for surrounding communities, but I don't expect the income of Whitefield to be much higher than Dalton. Coos County, I believe, has the lowest income rate in the state. And somebody else may be able to speak better to those figures.
It is now. It is. Highest poverty rate, lowest education rate.
The county?
It's
The county of Coos County, yes.
It's also tied to that the customers for this facility are not located in any of these surrounding towns. The economic justification, the justice part is economic. We are taking trash from wealthy Massachusetts towns who just want the stuff off their curb. Most of them don't know where it's going. When I talk to people in Mass, they don't know that half of their trash is going up here. It's going all over the place. Carolinas, it's going to Pennsylvania. But the towns up here that are economically disadvantaged, we're going to feel all the environmental impacts of this, all the nuisance stuff, all the cost part of this. They're not in need of this landfill. They're not going to be Casella's customers. Their customers are far, far away, either in the southern part of the state, where landfills, by the way, already exist. We could cut the carbon footprint. We could handle the capacity with existing landfills without knocking down virgin land and wetlands and all the rest of it with existing capacity. And that, to me, the economic injustice of this is these poor communities are going to suffer all the downside with no benefit. Other than some idiotic thing about picking up my trash on Tuesdays, which, you know, for that I'm going to let them put PFAS in my bloodstream. You've got to be kidding.
Ma'am, I'm just trying to pick people that haven't spoken already. Go ahead.
I'm not sure which one I did.
You.
Okay. I have a slight process question, because you've mentioned repeatedly that there's not a Section 10 waterway in that side of this project. Is that because the Ammonoosuc River is not considered to be a navigable waterway, or is that because the navigable waterway is just off the edge of the project?
Yeah, within the project boundary, there aren't any Section 10 waterways.
Yeah, because the roadway changes that are required will literally push the road closer to the river and expand that, and we run out of riverbank very quickly. And so if it's not in it, it's by a little bit of luck, honestly.
So the only two non-tidal Section 10 rivers in the state of New Hampshire, well, 3, not a river, but Connecticut River, Merrimack, and then Lake Umbago.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that's cool. It's good to know your definition is different from the Department of Homeland Security's definition, which is if you can paddle in a canoe. Thank you.
We've just got a couple of questions over here from Andrea Bryan, the gentleman with the blue hat, if we could get them next.
I just have to stand. I live in Bethlehem. I live about a mile from the landfill. So I don't open my windows at night because too often I've woken up in the morning with the stench in my house. I have been driven in by the stench. I'm woken up almost every morning from the noise. I think of Poor Forest Lake. Sound travels over lakes. I'm a mile away. White Mountain National Forest is one boundary. Cushing State Forest is on the other side of my boundary. We moved there, started building there 40 years ago, so I was there before NCS. And it used to be quiet. My late husband used to drive his motorcycle from Cannon Mountain, and I could hear him coming because it was a BMW. It was very distinctive. Now all I hear is NCS. Workers come to my house. It's like, what's that noise? And I think about what it's done to our town. It's divided us. I'm the administrator to a Facebook page that I started in 2011 to stop the 10-acre expansion, which they lied to us about. They said, you know what, pass this expansion and 10 acres, we won't buy any more land, we won't do anything. Well, they bought 100 acres surrounding NCS, supposedly for gravel, but then 3 years later came back, 5 years later came back with a host community agreement asking for landfill expansion, 20 more acres. They went for a $200,000 tax abatement. The town didn't fight it. They actually gave them more expansion because they bought that other land. They could go to the boundary. So that's the same thing's going to happen to Dalton. They're not going to stop at this. They haven't for us. They also, Dalton, like Bethlehem, is a very poor town. Dalton, unfortunately, doesn't even have zoning. At least we had zoning, and we've passed zoning laws, but we spent, what, $1 million? $2 million over the years, Bethlehem, to enforce our zoning that said they can't keep expanding. And they said, well, that's spot zoning, blah, blah, blah.
Did you face costs? Did the town have any costs from legal challenges?
Yes.
Yes.
Lots of them. Yes. You can look it up in the New Hampshire Municipal Association guide for elected officials. We're famous, Bethlehem, and the lawsuits that NCES instigated against us in a very small, not wealthy community. And it cost us a lot of money and tax dollars to defend ourselves from these lawsuits that were instigated by Casella. And I imagine that will happen as well to Dalton. And when you think about environmental equity, you know, it's a small community. Coos County not only has the highest rate of poverty in the state, it also has the highest population of senior citizens, which means that these are people on fixed incomes. And Casella comes in with all kinds of promises that, you know, there's going to be a chicken in every pot and the streets are going to be paved in gold. And, you know, if they had kept all those promises to Bethlehem, the streets would be paved in gold.
Well, and what they did is through the senior center, which is in Vermont, they offered the poor senior citizens some sort of free heating oil. I don't know how much, but Casella was going to pay for that. So there's manipulation. And so I have a question. So how does, so thinking of, and you talked a little about the cumulative effect. So the cumulative effect of the North Country on the people in the North Country being basically abused, I think. And so how does the destruction of one community's fabric fit into environmental justice and your decision? Because that's what we've seen in Bethlehem, and I know Dalton is starting to face it already, the fights.
Excellent.
That's a very broad question. I'll try to answer. The public interest review factors that we had listed on the screen, economics, needs and welfare of the people, fish and wildlife values, general water quality, many of those needs and welfare of the people, if I didn't say that already. Many of those touch a little bit on what you just asked about. Each of these that have a direct impact, again, we evaluate direct, indirect, and cumulative effects associated with that. Now, we typically look at cumulative effects in a watershed concept because our review is based on aquatic resources. When we're looking at more of the social evaluation factors, the boundaries are based on political boundaries in some cases, counties, states, regions. And so we need to set that boundary, and I don't know that we've necessarily done that yet since we're, again, looking at the factors where there would be a direct impact. And then if there is direct, we would look at indirect and then cumulative. But I appreciate that comment. A lot of the comments I'm hearing are really provoking a lot of thought in our process. So I really do appreciate those comments and questions. Ma'am, I haven't heard from you at all, so go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm going to stay seated, I guess. My name is Dalton. I live in Dalton. I used to sit on the Dalton Planning Board before this project was brought in and left after it was. So I have experienced the direct effects of the division of the potential project. The project hasn't even started yet. I think one of the things that I haven't heard anybody touch on, and wages, yes, and inequity in education, yes, and the fact that we just don't have a very loud voice because there aren't very many of us generally. One of the points up here is consideration of property ownership, and something that I am feeling like is especially felt in this area. There are lots of people in this region that are cash poor and land rich. That is the inheritance that they got from their parents potentially. That is all they have to give to their next generation. People that are tied to cottage industries that are on their land that really depend on making sure that their value stays high. Dalton, unlike Bethlehem, Dalton doesn't have a downtown that has anything going on, and it is a bedroom community. There isn't anything else driving people here other than the quiet and the pristine environment, and without consideration for how those land values are going to change, what that's going to do to our tax base as well, part of the drive. That's part of the reason why I live in Dalton myself, as a person who was in their 30s when they bought their home. It was the most affordable place for me to live. It wasn't the only place I wanted to live, it just was the place that I could step into. I don't know that I would be able to do that if taxes were higher because of potential projections into the taxes. I also just feel that our region is really bearing the brunt of the solid waste planning, or the lack of solid waste planning that our state has really fallen behind on. And so it is concerning to know that the state decisions are going to be tied to how you guys make your decisions, knowing that there just hasn't been a lot of updated plans. I know the state is working on that, but this region is expected to take whatever is given to us rather than being asked, because we have a lack of citizenry.
Going based on the gentleman's comments and Bella's comments regarding the North Country, paying the price, that is absolutely the case. I mean, I'm new here. I've only been here about 2 years, but I can tell you that moving from Illinois to the North Country, I mean, our habits have vastly changed in garbage and throwing things away and consumables and composting and recycling and everything else. And my husband will tell you that I've always been a recycler, but here I'm like the recycling Gestapo. And I mean, I say that because living up here in the North Country, we have to be so conscious of everything, because we have well water, and what goes into the ground goes into our bodies, whether we think about it or not. The fact that where a vast amount of this garbage is coming from, they put, I'm assuming here, very little or no thought into what they're putting into their garbage bags, because it's picked up from their curb and they never see it again. They don't know where it's going. They don't know what's happening to it, and we're basically paying the price for other people's ignorance or lack of desire to change their habits, and it's not right. We already have 2 major landfills within like a 50-mile radius, one in Bethlehem and one up in Berlin, and they're huge. And even DES did the reports, and they said we're good till, what was it, 2050? So why do we need another landfill for New Hampshire garbage? Northern New Hampshire is taking New England's trash, and we're not a trash can here. We moved here because it's beautiful, and we want to take care of what we have and be good stewards of the land. But we can't do that if everyone else just keeps dumping on us, and we have absolutely no choice but to just take it.
My name's Jennifer. I live at Dalton.
resident. I grew up in Dalton and moved back to Dalton after serving in the military to raise my family here. My major concern is air quality and off-gassing. And despite best intention and best practices, we can all concede collectively that all materials utilized in any construction have inherent weaknesses, both in design and in the materials itself, which break down over time, either due to how it's designed or exposure to various environments. To your knowledge, what percentage of landfills, such as proposed, have structural failures that directly impact air quality and health and safety of our population that you know of that have failures?
Yeah, that's not something that I'm going to know off the top of my head. Right. Again, we don't regulate landfills. And so that would be the solid waste authority in each particular state. Yeah, but I appreciate your comments and your questions.
So can I do a follow-up with that? Yeah. Because considering what you are under, in consideration with that building up and permitting, you said the bottom part, I don't know the technical word, and all of that. And the EPA studies regarding landfills and their contribution to the climate change, the disruption of migratory birds and impact to the health and safety of humans. Is it, and I don't know if you can answer this, but is it your or collectively opinions that another landfill within such close proximity as sovereigns of land would be a responsible and sound consideration?
Yeah, I would say we're not here to offer our opinions. We're here to hear what the environmental justice concerns are. But thank you for that. Oh, okay. Yep.
Thank you. You use the model of an environmental justice problem, free way that may go for a rich community or a poor community. I think that you probably have gotten a feel that there's multiple layers of environmental justice involved in this project. One layer, and I think they've been well covered, but I want to talk about one in particular, is there's a unique geography about Dalton that needs to be considered. The vast majority of people that live in Dalton that may benefit from the largesse of GSL, all those benefits that Joe Big discussed, live on the north and west side of Dalton Ridge. The vast majority, in fact, virtually all of the environmental impacts that will flow from GSL, if it is built, will be on the other side of Dalton Ridge, impacting a few people in Dalton, but in general, virtually all of the population of Littleton, Bethlehem, and Whitefield. Joe Gay has not mentioned anything about Casella engaging in those communities. So there's a real environmental justice problem because, if you will, the benefits, the largesse from Casella will flow to what's maybe several hundred households and thousands of households in different communities, including Bethlehem, Littleton, and Whitefield, will bear all of the impacts. That may be something that Casella can remedy by offering candy to those other communities. But absent that, there's a huge environmental justice problem here. Is benefits flow to the people that bear none of the costs, all of the people that bear all of the costs receive none of the benefits. You've also, I won't belabor this, but you've also heard about some of those other communities that are impacted, and I think you need to consider drawing them into this process. And again, can't be said enough is Massachusetts is relatively a rich state. versus New Hampshire. Massachusetts is in effect buying their way out of their trash problem by having Casella try to get permits to build GSL in New Hampshire. In the North Country, where virtually all of the facilities that the state would like to hide, not be part of communities, get located. But it's a downstate, upstate problem, rich versus poor, rich state versus poor state, communities that get all the benefits are not impacted, and communities that are impacted and getting all the benefits. So there's multiple layers here, and I hope that the board will consider all of those layers.
My name is Kathleen Fountain. I'm a resident here in Dalton, and I do live on Dalton Mountain, but it's on the side of Connecticut River. There's been a lot of valid points and very good questions provided to you, and I know you need to go through all these different things. But one thing that I picked up on when you were talking that I'm going to ask is simply, when you deal with the environment that is in that area, it was stated that trees would be taken down. And I'd like to have the thought of looking at that and how that's going to impact the area in regards to our carbon footprint. Because lately we've had a lot of different incidents with microbursts, and a good swath of trees just below us on our side was wiped out just 2 years ago. So we've lost trees, and I'd like the consideration that whatever trees are on this property that would be taken down be considered in your evaluation on the effect in regards to carbon footprint.
Thank you. I'm trying to find someone who hasn't spoken. So
Ladies and gentlemen, we've got just a few more minutes left, so I'd like to turn over to the gentleman in the blue and white hat in the room, because we haven't heard from him yet, and then we have 2 comments online.
I will try to make this as brief as I possibly can. I'm Rob Pensino. I do not live in Dalton. I live in Nashua, New Hampshire, and I'm from the New Hampshire Network for Environment. Yeah, I'm from, I'll just stand up, why not?
Okay.
Rob Pensino from Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm part of the New Hampshire Network for Environment, Climate, and Energy. And I also serve on the New Hampshire Environmental Justice Roundtable. And one thing that I wanted to sort of crystallize about everything that I'm hearing here, first of all, if you go to EJ Screen, the tool that you alluded to earlier, you're going to find that Coas County, almost the entire thing, is lit up as an EJ community. That, I think, is borne out by all of the comments that you've just heard this evening. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to mention is quite simply, I'm an environmental science teacher. That's how I make my living. And I have to tell you that wetlands are invaluable. Underappreciated, seen as a nuisance sometimes, but invaluable, ecologically and economically. Any reduction in wetlands, whether it's a square meter or whether it is the amount that's being talked about, is an environmental injustice relative to not just this community, but to all of the downstream communities. Because those wetlands filter water. Those wetlands serve to make the waters that travel downstream to Nashua and point south. Because I know that most folks think of Nashua as part of Massachusetts. It's not. Used to be. But that's neither here nor there, folks. The reality is that is the overarching theme here. And I wrote a comment to this effect and I submitted it online. Thank you for your time and thank you for being here.
Thank you. We did have 2 online questions that I wanted to bring up. First, how will incoming information be weighted? Will EJ considerations for impacted citizens' communities have equal weight in decisions? Was the first one.
Absolutely, that's why we're here. Yep.
Hopefully folks heard that, absolutely. And then the last question was, has the Corps considered evaluating the environmental preferable alternative rather than the least environmentally damaging practical alternative as allowed by recent NEPA changes?
Yeah, under, just a little bit of background on that, under NEPA, we evaluate all reasonable alternatives, so slightly different definitions, and then typically, under the 404B1 guidelines, the least environmentally damaging practical alternative is a harder bar to meet. So in most cases, it's our evaluation under the guidelines and our reference to LINTA. In most cases, again, that is the root of our alternatives analysis and focuses much more on our aquatic resources and those off-site alternatives. I'm very familiar with NEPA, but I'm not quite sure about that reference, but I will dig into those changes. I'm not tracking that exact reference.
Could I ask a procedural question? I know we're at the end of the time. Okay, thank you so much. We're so excited to have an EJ Roundtable discussion, and I really appreciate the offer to reach out to the Abenaki, which is a very diverse group in New Hampshire. So there's locals where I am in the Upper Valley. There's people up here. I would suggest that the outreach should it may take a lot of time, and I hope that is engaged in a thorough process. My question is, with that outreach and then the offer that we could submit other communities that there should be some outreach to, and those communities should get the opportunity, how do we reconcile that with the deadline for public comments being July 3rd? And so I'd like to ask the Corps to extend the public comment deadline to allow for this meaningful outreach, which you have committed to.
Yeah, so thank you for that. We have I'll say a general public notice comment period. We formally extended that to encompass this meeting for the public. If we make a determination that a public hearing is warranted, we would formally extend the public comment. I don't consider meaningful engagement with environmental justice communities, I don't necessarily consider that part of the formal comment period, and I'm realizing this isn't coming out right as I'm saying it. We will have environmental justice, meaningful engagement discussions throughout the process. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's not that if we had a meaningful engagement August 1st, it's not that we would not take comments and consider them. We will take those because it's a different group than just the general public. Not that the general public isn't important.
Well,
we will continue to consider those as we have engagements, if that makes sense.
So if we know people in our communities that haven't been engaged yet, and we want to tell them to submit comments, can I tell them you only have until July 3rd, or I just want to know, like, how can they engage if they might not be able to attend a hearing? They might like to submit comments.
And we want to have meaningful engagement, and again, everyone has a different definition of meaningful engagement, and I really want to know what meaningful engagement means to those communities. But to me, meaningful engagement isn't submitting a comment. So I would want to offer a discussion and a meeting that might look like this or something a little different if there's a community that we didn't engage with, if that makes sense.
Sure. I would just again request that the public, I think that some people, the opportunity to submit comments is a good, to have that as an option. It is an option for people, and I would just repeat the request to extend the public comment period.
Okay.
I think this is a great process, but it looks like the beginning of a process,
right.
And the deadline is next week. So I think to reconcile those, extending the deadline would make the most sense.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question. Would you consider low-income children to be part of environmental justice? I ask that because Forest Lake is really one of the only places where kids can swim, where they don't have to pay. And also, we have an affordable housing crisis here, so if all our drinking water is contaminated in Whitefield, the poor people won't be able to move because we can't afford it. I know we're out of time, but I'm just curious, would you all consider low-income children and low-income families that have no ability to move, their drinking water's contaminated, no other place to swim that's free. Is that part of environmental justice?
I think that falls squarely within what we're talking about.
Awesome, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time for tonight. Thank you for your comments, your questions, your consideration, and thank you for your participation. I also want to thank the fire department, the Coos County Sheriffs, and the Town of Dalton for hosting us this evening. Absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes this meeting. Absolutely. Thank you very much.